Now that we've talked about World War I, let's talk about the time period in between the wars, because we want to make sure we establish this relationship between the events of World War I being a result of the 19th century and how those unresolved issues continue to be problematic and eventually lead to World War II. Let's start with Russia. Russia is going to, and this obviously takes place while World War I is going on, but Russia gets rid of their Tsar. While the external conflict is raging with World War I or around them, the internal problems for Russia did not go away. Going back in time, Russia needed change and wanted change. The Tsar had become a symbol and a hurdle to oppression for many in Russia, and the opportunities for change had long been ignored. Russia's rapid industrialization and the rapid industrialization around them had really created both good and bad, and we've talked about that. So Russia's going to feel those growth issues of the growth of wealth for a few and the problems of the workers of many there. Communism is going to grow as an alternative. Remember, we talked about different variations of this communism when it comes to how much control and who controls the factors of production to what extent. There's going to be division of this in Russia. The Bolsheviks is going to be a very elitist movement who's going to call for letting the intellectuals of the movement make the decisions and show leadership, and everybody else just follows along. This is very different from a proletariat revolution where the workers are going to control the factors of production. The Russo-Japanese War earlier, remember in 1905, was a clear sign that the problems were exposing their weaknesses. Russians were obviously not happy. Over 200,000 Russians would show up at the Winter Palace to show their displeasure, but really asking the Tsar for help, showing that they were in need. Some miscommunication or what have you will lead the military to try to protect an exit by the Tsar, firing on the crowd, killing over 1,000. That's not a good way to settle the problems and solve the problems. Protests and strikes will obviously follow. Russia, of course, as we've already discussed, backs itself into World War I, a war it probably didn't want to fight, that it was probably very ill-prepared to fight. And with poor leadership and a failing economy, the Tsar is going to be removed in March 1917. It's going to be followed by a provisional or temporary government to establish until elections could determine a new direction for this nation. Bolsheviks will seize power in November 1917. Their leader, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, is going to promise to follow through on peace, land, and bread. Three things that Russians had definitely been in need of and been calling for quite some time. The competition for power was not over, as the Bolsheviks and the Communist Red Army, led by Leon Trotsky, is going to have to overcome both internal and external forces, known as the Whites, in order to win a brief civil war. It's going to last a few years to really establish a communist regime. Meanwhile, Lenin's communism had to be adjusted to restart what was really a failed economy. Actually didn't look much like the communism that had been talked about by Marx, yet the centralization of power was necessary to keep nationalism down. So in reality, the communists held all the power, again, not the proletariat like Marx had suggested. When Lenin dies, Joseph Stalin, who had risen through the ranks of the movement, will elevate to power, actually beating out and dismissing Trotsky. He is going to misuse this power to unspeakable proportions, and we'll talk a little bit more about him when we get done with to the conclusion of World War II and beyond. So what does the totalitarian regime look like? Totalitarian regimes are going to need some ability to promote policies with mass communication, whatever that mass communication may be in that age. Today, obviously, it would be social media, so either using social media or denying people the use of social media so that they can get their message across. Terror is also an effective way to ensure people of the population comply. If people are too scared not to follow the rules and the dictates of the government, then it becomes effective. Education systems are huge for all these totalitarian regimes. As we look in our next video at how dictators or as we look at the crisis that occurs between these wars with dictators like Hitler and Mussolini coming to power, we're going to see that they're going to turn to the youth, and they're going to use these practices of education to justify and glorify their policies. This is going to build lasting results and ideas that will be placed upon impressionable minds. You obviously aid this with propaganda messages and censorship, having total control over the message. The elimination of religion will avoid the competition. They've got no one else to turn to, so it's only to rely on the government. This Soviet economy, after it's established under communism, sort of works. 5-year plans focusing on heavy industry brings huge output production. However, the same policies are going to limit the success of collective farms, and consumer production is going to be very inefficient. There's going to be huge shortages. If you oppose, you run the risk of being eliminated. Remember Machiavelli, who said you'll do whatever you have to do to stay in power. We'll come back in the next video of Here Between the Wars and look at how nationalism is important to China and really other places in Asia. Thanks.